So I got to ride the entire 2024 KTM Enduro line. That's the XCWs. 95% of the parts on those bikes are new, and we're gonna talk about what the hits and the misses are right now. It's very rare that a bike gets this many changes year over year. 95% of the parts on this bike is, this is the old 23 bike. By the way, you can enter to win this bike. I'm giving this bike away in the month of June. This bike and that TM Racing, or TME and 300 over there, go to my website to get entered. But it's very rare that a bike takes on this many changes from the 23 model year to the 24 model year. We saw it last year in the SX bikes and the XC bikes, and I wasn't happy with all of the changes, how it worked for like hard enduro. And so I was pretty nervous, but I got invited by KTM to go out to the model launch of the enduro range. And we got to ride the 150 XCW, 250 XCW, 300 XCW, and 450 XCF-W. And so I've got some thoughts about it. And I actually printed out the little sheet here because there's a lot of changes that happen with these bikes. But let me just say one thing here. And that one thing is that this bike is freaking good. Now, on the XC bike, a lot of the changes I didn't actually love because the bike got so stiff, and I was terrified that these XCW models, they were gonna take away from some of the magic, which is the fact that for hard enduro, soft enduro, and like aggressive trail riding, it's not too stiff, because the 23 XC bikes I felt were too stiff. They actually have redesigned the fork, and it's now a closed cartridge. They're calling it we're no longer having the Explorer fork, it's now a closed cartridge exact fork. It's a spring fork on the Enduro model. So the XCW will have the closed cartridge spring, and so will the XC on the 24 model year on those bikes. The SX bike still gets an air fork, but it is from what I felt riding that bike, it's the plushest and the best out of the box stock suspension fork that I have actually used. And the longer I rode throughout the day, the more and more comfortable I felt with it. So tons of changes to the bikes. 95% of the parts have changed. It's a totally new frame. It's a totally new motor. So it's the TBI motor. It'll be the throttle body fuel injection with an electronic power valve. But it's also oil injected. So now KTM's got a couple of a distinction here, because on the XC bike, which is the full-on race bike, GNCC or desert race bike, that is a premix bike. It's not oil injected, but the XCW bikes are still oil injected. So they're kind of having both sides there, which I think is smart. I've never had a problem with an oil pump going out. Some people have, but I love the ease of just putting the oil down in the reservoir and being able to just put pump gas in the bike. So that will also be a thing on the 2024 Enduro line, the XCW. Now, so I got to ride the 150, 250, and 300 of the two strokes, and they're all very good. I loved the 250, I loved the 300. The 150 XCW didn't light my fire as much. The bike that I rode, I don't know, I just wasn't super blown away with it, but the 250 and the 300 did feel amazing. They do have an optional map switch, which you got map, I don't know if it's map 1 or map 2. Basically, you have the hot switch and you have the enduro switch or map. I don't really think, I've never been a fan of these like soft maps on the two strokes, and I'm still not a fan of it on the 24s. So it's an optional thing. It doesn't come with the KTM. It's already pre-wired. You can there's a thing under the seat, I think you can just plug in or out. It's on the hot map by default, but you can buy the map switch. I honestly don't think, for me, I wouldn't even buy it because I don't ever go into the softer map. Here are some of the other things to kind of call out. Like I said, 95% of the components are new. That's a freaking totally new bike, guys. One of the cool things about it was that they made the frame a lot more rigid for the motocross bikes and the XC bikes, but that rigidity doesn't translate through where the XCW feels like it's just beating the heck out of you. It still feels really mellow, and mellow is not the right word, but it feels very planted and it feels very good. It was tracking very, very straight, and it wasn't too stiff. So they obviously redesigned the fork. It's an open, or the closed cartridge fork. They redesigned the shock too, because it's got a brand new swing arm and the entire frame is different. So the way that the shock mounts is different. The whole shock on the back is like a shorter, more compact design. I asked them about PDS. So some of you guys are like, Some people don't love PDS, probably because they read somewhere in a motocross magazine that PDS doesn't work as good as a linkage bike, and it probably doesn't on a track. But for off-road riding, for single track riding, and for like enduro style stuff that we do, the PDS does offer some advantages, and it's here to stay. I talked to multiple people at KTM and WP, and they're like, yeah, the PDS is a KTM technology, and we're keeping that. We want to keep that because then you don't catch up on rocks and logs and roots and all that kind of stuff. So, and I really enjoy it. So they've made a point to stick with that, which I was glad, because I was like, if you've got the, you know, the Gas and the Husky, which have linkage, now the XCW bike in KTM is the only thing in that model, all of their models, that has PDS, and I'm glad they're keeping it. So brand new engine, it'll be in here. I keep pointing at the 23, but I'll be rolling in some other shots or whatever. But it's a brand new engine, brand new chassis. It's got the TBI, throttle body injection, so it's the second generation of these TPIs, or fuel injection, I should say. TPI, I'm saying, is the first generation. TBI, throttle body injection, is, I feel, the second version of it, and I think it is better overall. It's a new 39mm Kean throttle body in there. It's got the electronic power valve, which we've talked about before, and I think it works fan-freaking-tastic. It also has the oil pump, which we talked about. So the bike, the XCWs, will still be oil injected and fuel injected, so you can put pump gas in them. So we talked about the fork, we talked about the forks, we talked about the shock, we talked about the new swing arm. There's new triple clamps on these bikes. They're still forged on the XCWs, but the new 24 looks more like a CNC triple clamp. I'm not sure that these bikes are going to turn quite as tight in the 24 model year as the 23 model year, because you don't have, on the 23s and the older bikes, you had these steering stops that you could take out. And Graham Jarvis always told me, hey, take those out so that you can turn tighter. They've changed that on the new frames, where I'm not sure, you can't take anything out, and I'm not sure it's gonna actually turn as tight. So that's something to note. Let's see. We talked about the shock, we talked about the fork. They're putting an LED headlight on the bikes. I'll pull this over. See, this is an aftermarket light. This is the Cherubies VSL. I don't know if I have one of these. The old, I've got it somewhere around here. The old headlights on the XCWs and stuff, they were not that great. They were not good at all. So now it's got a 300, I mean, they're saying 300% brighter. Another thing about that, a lot of people have asked, like, what is the stator output on the 24 bikes? They didn't give us an exact spec of like, it puts out this many watts, but they did assure us that the XCWs will have a stator that will be similar to what the TPI bikes were in the prior years, such that it'll have plenty of wattage to run a fan and run a light, because they know that is very important to us, that they need to run those things as well. Because the XC bikes now don't have a good enough stator to run a lot of stuff. It's a very low output stator, because it's the same as like the SX bike, and it's kind of ridiculous because now it's hard to put anything on an XC bike as far as like something that's going to pull more power. It's still got a 6-speed wide ratio transmission. And from what I could tell, I don't know, because I have to ride them back to back, but it really does kind of seem like now the XC and the XCW have the same freaking gearbox, which it was probably my favorite thing about the XC before, is it had a semi-close ratio transmission. It didn't quite have the low first and second gears the XCW had, and then but it was just progressive. Whereas on the XCWs, you have like a bigger gap between second gear and third gear than you do the others. And I don't love that, but I think the XCs and the XCWs, from what I can tell, probably have the same transmission right now, which again, I'm not super in love with. Another thing, so they also raised like the foot pegs. You have, now your hands and your feet are closer together. That is not something I like. I liked like how I felt like I could spread out on the KTMs before, and now I feel like I'm a little bit more hunched in, more cramped in, like I'd feel on a lot of the other bikes. And so, yeah, that one I'm not super stoked about. But overall, here's what my overall thoughts are. They have made a really great enduro bike. Probably the best one they've ever made. When you look at the fork and you say the fork is better, probably the best fork that they've ever built. And maybe the best fork that's ever come on any production motorcycle. So the fork is great, the frame is great, it isn't too rigid, the motors are killer. Like, you can't beat these TBI motors. They run like crazy. And I haven't had to tune any one of them. They've all come great right out of the box, every one that I've ridden. So they're tuning themselves, they're regulating themselves, similar to what the fuel injected 4-strokes do. There's no jetting. You've got an amazing fork. You've got a lot of really, really cool stuff on these bikes. Yeah, I'm not super happy about how I feel a little bit more cramped. Also, another thing I don't love, see on these older generation bikes, you had basically 6 positions that you could put your bars in, because you had different bolting places in the top of the triple clamps. Now all you can do is, it's just like the XCs have been, where you can flip the mount around. It's an offset mount. So basically you only have 2 positions for your bars, whereas on the older XCWs, you had at least 4 positions that you could put them in. So yeah, there's some really good stuff with the bikes. I'm just very, very happy that they didn't ruin the XCW. Not that they were gonna ruin it, but for the type of riding that I like to do, I don't know that the XC got better in 23, but I do feel like the 24 XCWs, overall, it is better, because it's a better motor, it's less finicky, requires less tuning, it's a better fork. The rest of the bike is, and it's a solid bike. So really loved riding the 300, the 250. Didn't love the 150 as much. Talking just briefly about the 450 XCW. I know we're long ways into this video, or XCF-W. It was a really big bike for the type of riding that we had. We had a grass track that we could go on, and then a little woods course or whatever. It was just too big of a bike for me for the woods course. But it does have like a quick shift option, where you, from 2nd gear to 6th gear, you don't have to let off the gas. You can just pull up on the shifter. You don't have to hit the clutch, and it basically drops the RPM, or drops like the ignition or something for a couple milliseconds, and it lets you shift up. So on those 450s, you can just stay on the gas. Once you get into 2nd gear, you can stay on the gas and just pull up on the shifter, and it will allow you to, it will take off the pressure just enough that you can click into the next gear from 2nd gear to 6th gear. I tested that on like a dirt road there, and it did work fine, but I mean, how often am I going to use that? Me, very rarely. I guess if you were in a race situation, like a desert race or something, on the start, it could be helpful. Or if you're in a motocross race, but these are the W bikes, so you're probably not going to be doing motocross, but I believe they'll have that for the motocross bikes as well, with this quick shift option. Don't quote me on that, but yeah. So thanks for KTM for bringing me out. They paid for the flight and the hotel to go out, but I wasn't paid to do it, and I got to ride the bikes. Sorry this video didn't come out as soon as everyone else, as I had graduations and all kinds of stuff that I've been dealing with. But yeah, if you want to win, here's the thing. This is a 23 XCW, barely has any hours on it, and this is the sweepstakes bike that I'm giving away in the month of June. Also that TM EN300 ES FI2T. Go to my website, dirtbikechannel.com, right now to get your entries for that. You can either grab yourself like one of these hats, one of these shirts, a lot of the other stuff that we have. There's a ton of other stuff we have over there. You can also use my links to Rocky Mountain ATV. If you click the link down in the video description, it'll take you over to the Dirt Bike Channel. And there's a link there that says Shop Rocky Mountain ATV. Once you click on that link, you can buy anything they sell. Rocky Mountain ATV is awesome, and it will give you entries into the sweepstakes if you do it in the month of June here in 2023. So yeah, lots of updates on those bikes. The Enduro models, 95% of the parts are new. I said it on the 23 XCs and SXs, and now for the 24 XCWs. This is the biggest change that I've ever seen on any motorcycle by any company, from one model year to the next. So many things changed, and not all of them are perfect, but I am thankful that we have a company that is pushing the envelope. I don't think anyone is pushing the envelope as much as KTM, and people say, oh, it's super expensive or it's unreliable. That TM was just as expensive. The Shirkos that I bought are just as expensive. All of the bikes are expensive. So when you sit there and you say, well, KTM's the most expensive, actually, no, it isn't. It's more expensive than the Japanese bikes, but you get more. There's more R&D happening. You're getting more for your money with the KTM's, Huskies, and the gas gases. You just are, as compared to like a Yamaha, Honda, Kawasaki, Suzuki. You're getting more for your money. That's a fact. You know, Beta's a great bike, Shirko's a great bike, TM's a great bike, but nobody's pushing the envelope as much as KTM is. Some people like that, some people don't, but it's a fact. KTM is pushing the envelope and raising the ship for all of us, and the new TBI motors are an example of that. Yeah, no kickstart anymore, but hey, it doesn't matter. They're not putting that back on. It's not coming back, and I have never been stranded because I didn't have a kickstart, knock on wood. Hopefully you don't either. But anyway, that's what I've got for you guys. Hopefully you get entered to win this bike and the TM over there. If you have a chance to get a 2024 Enduro bike, the XCWs, go ahead and do it. They're great bikes. You're gonna have the best fork, the best motor, just a ton of really cool stuff on that bike. So that's what I've got for you. You can always email me, kyle@dirtbikechannel.com. Go to my website, get in touch with me, follow us on socials, and get entered to win this bike, the old outdated TPI. Anyway, I'm about to die. So thanks for watching, and until next time, leave a single track.